Interesting title. It's never too early to undertake VM and VE. My presentation will be basically dealing from the street level or the facilitator level, practitioner level. So I'm just trying to share some tips that I've learned over the years about value management, and some of the comments this morning about moving it up earlier into the process. Can't agree with more. It's been a process for over 20 years trying to move that in this direction. And there was another comment by Paul that again, I fully agree with, that in North America, VM a lot of times is looked at as an event versus part of a process. And that's something that we have to continually keep working on to move that into the full design process. But the amazing thing, if in a lot of cases you're dealing with VM or VE as an event, so it's very important to get the project off to a good start. So what we'll be talking about today was some good management and value management, getting things done. The very basic thing, how to even get to the table to do one of these. There's a quote I often refer to, and it's an old one, but it's to find a need and fill it. In a lot of cases, when people are being introduced to the VM concept, they don't even realize that there is a need to do this. You get a lot of resistance that we're talking about a little later on. And we use it. I agree totally that it should be part of the value management should be provided with the overall, or be part of the overall management tool process. How to apply VM at an early stage. We're going to talk about expectations at different stages and overcoming obstacles. And I've got several examples, some pretty humorous over the time. As practitioners, we're not allowed to deal with specifics on particular projects unless we get specific approval by clients. And a lot of times they don't give that, because a lot of times during these sessions, there's it's either secret work that we're working on, or they're not terribly pleased to put any other mistakes out into the public domain, which could happen through this. So you're dealing with not only technical issues, you're dealing with management and interpersonal issues. So we always check with our clients at the end to get an evaluation of the VM program or the VM project that we're working on. And often in coffee break, we'll also, solicit the different opinions that are coming back. But one things that keep coming back are people that get involved with the process, especially, the first time. They generally say it's a great process, a great methodology. Some of the comments, I wish we'd have started this earlier in the process. And that's why we're doing this if we're dealing it within an events-based. We would have saved a lot of time compared to a lot of, I think Paul mentioned this earlier, that there's VM is one of the few analytical methodologies out there that has good definitions and can help you move and help in things like your project charter or the interviews. We find a lot of times there's assumptions made at the early stages of projects that if they are subject to a rigorous analysis, you find out they're either person specific, somebody's got a high interest in one area. So, but we'll chat about this. And what amazes me is there's always, boy, I wished I'd have used that on this other project, boy, because that ever saved this. So, and it's also comments coming back. I wish this was part of our corporate design strategy. So I've seen some movement over this in the last several years. It hasn't been quick enough, in my opinion, but there's a very crowded marketplace out there with different methodologies that we have to deal with. So These are a few comments that we've received. So now we'll just step back and say, hey, what is the purpose of VM to begin with? And I've broken it out into 4 areas. We have to satisfy the client's and stakeholder needs. We have to be able to qualify what is a want and what is a need. And this goes back to my earlier comment that I don't think there's a lot of time spent on this when people are putting their projects together. It's the main thing. One of the things is to drive innovation and continuous improvement. And the ultimate goal is to achieve the best value for money. So value management, it's either a reactive part of looking at a project when there's, I guess it was, Steve was mentioning sometimes the triggers on the VM projects, and if I've caught that right, are, if a project's starting to run into trouble because of cost and schedule problems. So we want to get to the front end of this, and when you're talking to your clients or trying to influence your different agencies, says it's best if you deal with this in a proactive manner to get the best value for money. Like when I was doing a lot of construction work, the big thing was we don't want any surprises. And the same thing happens when you're going through the design process. So to do value for money, and the nice part of the VM methodology, it is structured, but it's also very adaptable to work within different things like lean or theory of constraints or continuous improvement. So the nice thing here, it does work seamlessly. That if you start with the VM process, you can use any of these other methodologies as part of the tool set. And the advantage of that is there's people are more willing to go along with you if they can use some tools that they're already using. So this is the value management process. It could also be called value engineering, and the highlighted areas are function analysis and functional performance spec. The FPS, as Lucy mentioned, we've worked together for quite a few years, and that's where I've learned to understand the FPS process and fully endorse it. So this is the out of the whole process is the other highlighted areas are not unique to the value management process. So, but function analysis has to be understood by the practitioner, somewhat high level by the client. And I find that although clients catch on to the process quickly, it's very hard to work this into their day-to-day operations in other areas. So we go from information all the way through to evaluation and development. But our secret sauce is the function analysis and the functional performance spec. And this works exceptionally well at the front end of the project. So I often find when we introduce, if we do a value engineering study at any other level, then we've entered a controversial and combative state that has to be managed. So I can get into that a little more. So what we're really trying to do is come down to back to the value. What is value? And how do you measure that? And that's by how well are you satisfying needs. The VM process provides a tool to quantify that, which is other than just doing it from, not hearsay, but it gives a way to actually quantify it. And the denominator in these cases can be cost. It can be many things, but it can be cost, schedule, whatever is important to the client at that time. So where do we get into? We want to be able to sort out the wants versus needs. And traditionally, I find when I'm dealing with clients, there's usually a lot of time and effort. It could be over months that have gone ahead trying to get the needs of the customers, their own internal people just to make sure they have it right, but they do it by individual interviews. And I find if you interview 10 or 15 people, you're going to get 10 or 15 ideas, and the person assembling this information has an extremely hard time sorting this out to be able to determine what is the want and the need. So we find the group setting, especially at the concept stage of a project, where I can get the core team members together and have a discussion of, okay, here's where we're trying to go. Here's what we're trying to do. Now, okay, how is this important? And so you not only identify the needs, you translate that into a function, and then you quantify it by using the functional performance specification. So for those that haven't used functional performance specification, I highly recommend you look into this more. So the great part is by bringing this information to an early stage of whether you call it a value planning session or part of the overall value management process, it's essential that you get the wants and needs sorted out really early, because if you follow the wants category, you're going to find your project blow up way out of proportion. At the street level view, it seems great. Let's just put a team together. But in practice, when I'm talking with project managers, I tell them this is probably going to be your biggest challenge, at least with the clients that I deal with, of getting people to the table. For whatever reasons, business is still in a lot of cases is a silo effect. And this is the first one says it's not in my profit and loss statement, so you can't have my time. Unless you can plan having these events so people can work them into their schedule, then you have a tendency to become a real nuisance to them by so the project manager, whoever, trying to get that multidiscipline team together is a lot more of a challenge, in my experience, than it needs to be. But again, value management, if it's part of the whole management process of a company, then time can be allocated in there. And my caution is when you're putting a value session together, for project managers, I say be very aware that there's going to be people trying to back out of this at the last second and leave you a couple of people short in your committee, or your group. So what I encourage the project manager is to make sure not only do you contact people that you have identified and need a multidiscipline team, but you go way up in the corporate ladder to make sure that when you're doing one of these, that somebody at the vice president level has endorsed this and brings on, makes sure that these people are going to show up, because that could really disrupt part of your to get all of the information that you need on the table in these sessions. Because the last thing you want to do is have people missing, and then their views become known that, oh no, if I was at that meeting, I wouldn't have agreed with this recommendation. So the big thing is don't underestimate the difficulty of getting people into the room. So at a high level, why do we do this at the concept stage? If you only get one shot at value management or one event, which again in North America is still, I think, more of the norm, then here's the things that you have to be able to talk about. You're going to be able to clarify your project scope, and among the team members, the human dynamics side of it is you develop a team. I've seen this with several of our clients, especially our larger clients, where there's several, thousands of employees virtually involved with this. Most of the makeup of the subject matter experts coming from internal clients is that these are you have one or two people that will have familiarity with this process, but most of the people won't. A lot of times in big corporations, because of the silo effect, there's people could be sitting on the next floor and have never met each other, but by working together as an integrated team, this approach has a great chance of getting people right at the concept part of a project. And then as you move past this into if other value engineering studies are required through the design or implementation process, then this team of people will, the communication channels are open for them. And so I guess I never want to underestimate that. The VE analysis is also an excellent way to pull out the customer needs, and it does a much better job of that than Lean or some of the other groupings, just because we do find a way to quantify these. Other things that you have to be careful of is decisions discerning on the scope and the needs and the constraints. A lot of this comes at the very early stage of the project and has a tendency to sort these things out very, very early in the process. So some of these other things, later stages are composed of mainly subject matter experts, but in the concept stage of the project, a lot of times you're looking at the users or end users, and you're not I won't say you're not terribly interested on all of the subject matter experts, specifically the external ones. But it's very important that you have a good cross section of people within your corporation that are attending this. VM at the concept stage is usually is shorter. It's in that 2 to 3 day range. And I guess it was Paul Scarborough that mentioned earlier that Japan has endorsed a lot of this by doing much shorter period projects. So the key is what I've seen in here is with the concept stage, I've dealt with too many projects that have been introduced to value engineering later in the stages, and it becomes a real mess trying to get these things sorted out. So if you can get the goals and objectives and things lined up early in the process, your project will go much better. You have less chance of cost overruns and less chance of schedule creeping. So again, I think it was Paul that said there's not many big projects that come in on time and on budget these days. But using VM in part of the process, that's been proven over many years that if you do that, there's a lot less chance of major cost overruns. So graphically, what does this mean? If you get things sorted out right off the bat, there's much less chance of reworking, whether that's a product or a process. So if you catch it early and get your needs sorted out, you'll be much better off. So I wanted to introduce a bunch of examples that we've done over the years and at different phases, and just explain a few of the things that I experienced in this. And I think one of the more interesting ones was in Canada, a multi-use recreational center that we were asked to participate in. And it was interesting because it was an architect that contacted us to do this work. And I asked him why he would contact us, because that's not that common in Ontario to have architects initiate or ask for a VE study. I'm not sure about other provinces, but anyway, he said, well, the main reason I'm contacting you is because I'm the third architect on this project. the first two have been fired, and I don't want to be the third person involved in getting fired. So there was a large donor. This was a private school, and the architects weren't particularly listening to them. So we were able to bring it together over just a couple of day session, getting a combination of staff at the university, some external users and students involved with this process. And within the 2 days, using functional performance spec and function analysis, we were able to do this. The center is, if those in St. Catharines, is Ontario is the Ridley College. So if you get a chance to go over there, you'll see that, which the architect ended up winning an award for. Another thing I'm going to be chatting on out of this, you would expect, well, I'll just leave that. Another project was a little farther down. A feasibility study had been done. It was a large geographic area that was looking at many areas of flood control, roads, agriculture. And we were able to look at that feasibility study, and we uncovered several errors within that particular report. So before it went into detailed design, we were able to, I guess, stop that project from progressing because it wasn't going to meet the needs of the user. So that started in the process. So as you can imagine, that was a little more controversial. We've moved into another project that had a conceptual design already completed. It was a major bus rapid transit system. And it was actually, I think it was into detailed design. And by looking at this process, we were able to, step back and have a look at it. Was the potential solution going to meet the needs of the customers? And it became pretty obvious that it wasn't going to meet that for not only technical, but cultural reasons. And again, I can't get into too many details on this, but essentially the design was stopped and rethought. And again, it's started to get a little controversial because there was a year's worth of work had already been done on this. Another project in this case was with the Ministry of Transportation. This was if for those who know about Ontario, going from Sault Ste. Marie up to Thunder Bay on Lake Superior route is a very hilly terrain. And there was one particular area that in the wintertime, the storms would come in off Lake Superior. So they were looking at a major route, and I can't remember the exact amount, but it was maybe $100 million, plus looking at this project or potential bypass for a hill. But essentially in the wintertime, or in most of the time, it was other than tourist traffic, it was a truck route. But you could have a highway closed for up to 24 hours on this and back up a couple thousand trucks. So one of our innovations on this, by being able to look at this at the concept stage, let's say, okay, we know how to do this technically, but is there another way to do this? And so we brought in actually one of the head weather specialists from Environment Canada, and by him explaining how because of the great, and this was, 600 or 700 foot high hill they had to negotiate. It was actually, he told us there was 3 different climate patterns in this just on that one hill. And the people that they had, which would be our patrol people or the MTO patrol people, weren't capable of understanding the weather patterns up there. So we were able to, what flowed out of this was actually they designed a much better storm warning system for this area. And they could notify people in Sault Ste. Marie or coming down from Wawa or Thunder Bay route, give them advanced knowledge that they could take an alternate route, because there was no great route at that time to do that. It was a huge effort to move from Highway 17 to Highway 11. So for the price of putting in early warning systems, we were able to avoid $100 million plus of constructions. So that was great, heading it at the concept phase. One that I wasn't involved with, but MTO had documented quite a few years ago, was on the Queen Elizabeth Highway around the Oakville area. And I know Steve Holmes and Mike Pearfall will be able to provide more information, but this was an example that was done, design complete, ready to go to tender. I don't know what triggered the VE study, but essentially they looked at it and said, yes, this design helps everybody on the QEW, but it doesn't do much for the people on Highway 25. So they actually scrapped that design. So you can see the time and effort that had been spent on that was basically a throwaway. The other side of it, without VM, that would have intersection would have, or interchange would have been completed, but it would not have supplied the need for the people on Highway 25. So there probably would have been a lot of backlash on that project. So
great, Tom, is your time is up now.
Oh no.
Oh yes. So are you on your last slide?
I guess I am. Just a second here. I thought I would. What? I thought I had. Can I just take one extra minute here?
1 extra minute.
Okay. So getting back to the business of value management, find a need and fill it. Successes can be short-term on projects, but I find clients have a very short memory for this. So unless it gets brought back into the policy side of a project, then you're spending a lot of energy. So what you're trying to do is repeat and referral business. And that's a goal, a long-term goal. So I'll just flip that over to you. Say, how's your experience with VM working so far? And I just open it up if I still have time for questions.